Minnesota Vikings wide receiver Justin Jefferson resetting the wide receiver market. Why the 49ers missed the boat waiting too long. And the new backup to George Kittle in-house. All that and more coming up on today's Locked On 49ers.
You are Locked On 49ers, your daily San Francisco 49ers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On 49ers. Brian Peacock and Eric Crocker at BD Peacock at Crocky209. Thanks, everybody, for making us your first listen on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We love our everydayers, and we love it even more when you hit that subscribe button on YouTube or wherever you are listening to this podcast. Today's episode of Locked On 49ers is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 with any winning $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/locked-on to get started. Woo, big signing by the San Francisco 49ers. Not Brandon Aiyuk, though, Croc. We'll get to Logan Thomas, what he means, where he will be, in my opinion, on the depth chart for the 49ers at the tight end position. And, a battle for tight end 2, 3, 4 on this roster in training camp. But Justin Jefferson, mega contract. He not only sets a new high for wide receivers in the NFL, $35 million per year, 4 years, $140 million for Minnesota Vikings star wide receiver Justin Jefferson. But he also leapfrogged Nick Bosa as the highest paid non-quarterback in the NFL. So Bosa got to be that guy for one season. Now Justin Jefferson's the highest paid non-quarterback in the NFL. And this wide receiver money, Croc, is just skyrocketing despite how many good receivers there are in the league and despite how many good wide receivers there are in every draft. It seems like there's not a scarcity problem, I guess, in the NFL that makes this price come down. The top guys are still worth a ton of money. And the big question now for the 49ers, for 49ers fans, for our listeners, Croc, is what does this do to the negotiations with Brandon Aiyuk, and does this hurt the San Francisco 49ers' ability to bring in Brandon Aiyuk?
You know, that was my first thing when I saw that he signed for how much money he did. I never thought that Brandon Aiyuk would get that amount of money, but it definitely still continues to kind of change or not change the fact that the 49ers waited too long to try to make this signing happen. You know, a lot of guys that got signed, and between the $35 million per year that Justin Jefferson is getting, and then the $25 million per year that eventually Devontae Smith will get, I think that Aiyuk falls in between there somewhere. But if they could have got the deal done sooner, I think you could have justified giving him closer to what Devontae Smith got. And now you just cannot because of all the signings that have happened since then.
Do you think Brandon Aiyuk's camp wanted to let this play out so that he could sign last? And CeeDee Lamb is kind of the only other guy left with Brandon Aiyuk, both first rounders in that 2020 class, to sign new deals. Because while it's true that Brandon Aiyuk shouldn't expect to get the money that Justin Jefferson got, it makes whatever position he and his agents have stronger, right? If Brandon Aiyuk came in this offseason is like, we want $29 million, and the Niners are like, nope, we think it's $26.5 million or whatever. Whatever position Brandon Aiyuk's agents had, that got stronger, right? And there's no reason that Brandon Aiyuk needs to come closer to where the 49ers number is with these new contracts. That's for sure. Even though, $35 million is not going to be the number for Brandon Aiyuk. Now the question is, how much does he actually get? Does he get a lot more than Devontae Smith? Does he get more than Amon-Ra St. Brown because he signed after instead of before? That would be my question. So if the 49ers certainly aren't saving money and getting a bargain by waiting longer to sign Brandon Aiyuk. Maybe it ends up being the same as it was always going to be, but certainly the 49ers didn't help themselves by waiting until these other deals have been done.
I wonder how much it matters. Like, what was the 49ers say? You know what, Aiyuk, you won't hold out the entire season. You will be coming back playing on your fifth-year option where you get paid decent money. And then the following season, if they franchise tag him because of these escalated numbers per year with all of these guys, he's going to get paid. What is it, like the average amount of the top 5 receivers. So if you got Jefferson getting 35, Jamar Chase, he's going to fall somewhere around there as well. I'd say the lowest amount of guys is probably going to be Tyreek Hill. He's at 30 million. So that means that if he gets the average out of the top 5 guys, which I assume at that time, there's going to be about 5 guys making over 30 million. He would still get paid handsomely next year.
He'll get a good amount of money. That's one of my questions with all this, with Brandon Aiyuk and all these players around the NFL. Have NFL teams and GMs lost their gumption, Croc? Because one of the things I'm seeing around the league, and I'm sure for Brandon Aiyuk, it's this way. So Aiyuk wants open market money without having to hit open market. He wants it when he wants it, right? And he wants it, but doesn't have to change teams. Because back in the day, when a player wanted to maximize how much money they were going to get, they would fight. The team would fight them on it, and they would have to hit free agency, and you might have to go sign with the Carolina Panthers, right? But the Brandon Aiyuk wants to be able to play in Super Bowls, but still get the same money he would get on the open market if a team like the Carolina Panthers, whoever else, were all bidding on him. And teams seem to be caving now and giving players both. Whereas in the past, teams would play a little bit more hardball. Like the 49ers could say to Brandon Aiyuk, you're under contract. And guess what? Franchise tag, you're going to be under contract next year for an amount of money per year that's probably less than what we would have to give you that you're asking for in a long-term contract. It would come in under $30 million for that 1 year pay under the franchise tag. And then guess what? We could slap another tag on you after that. That's 3 years of control the 49ers could flex. Now, I understand why they wouldn't want to flex all of that, but I would understand why if money got too far away from where they wanted to be, and just it feels weird because teams aren't doing this anymore, but it has been collectively bargained. Like the rules, the 49ers don't have to offer Brandon Aiyuk anything right now. It could have him under control for the next couple of seasons if they wanted to play hardball, but nobody plays hardball anymore.
I think that's where the leverage aspect of it comes from. The 49ers clearly have the leverage here, and he's under their control, but it does kind of hurt you long-term if you are the 49ers. Think back on Kirk in different positions, but Kirk Cousins, right? They end up paying him so much to tag him 2 years in a row and then let him walk, right? Or traded him, whatever it was. So you get – no, did he walk? Did he hit free agency?
Kirk Cousins is like the only quarterback that has hit free agency, and then he did it twice. Like quarterbacks just don't hit free agency unless they're the backup variety usually, Right. So it was pretty wild for Kirk Cousins, and the way he played it. Got tagged twice, so he couldn't get tagged again, hit free agency, and then he just got to hit free agency a second time and got 2 huge contracts. And so Kirk Cousins is doing pretty well for himself in the bank account department.
So that's one example, but it's hard to kind of compare them because one's a quarterback, one's a receiver. But here's a guy that I think is a little bit more comparable. There's a cornerback, and his name is Trumaine Johnson. And I paid attention to this because I personally know Trumaine Johnson. He's from Stockton, California. Let's go. Oh, nice. Edison High School, where I coach. Yeah. All right, so True got tagged back-to-back years by the LA Rams, and it made him a lot of money. But you didn't have that long-term security over that. Now, where it helped him, he got tagged 2 years in a row, making, I think at that time it was around $15 million per year. And we're talking about several years ago, maybe, I don't know, 2017, 2018, in that ballpark of years. That's a lot of money for a cornerback then. That's a lot of money now for a cornerback. Travarius Ward isn't getting that. So he got roughly $15 million each one of those tagged years, and then ended up signing a big contract with the Jets. Now, it didn't work out with the Jets, but that was a guy that ended up making a lot of money. The issue with it is players want long-term security, and those tags don't give them that. So let's say Trumaine Johnson, if he played the 1 year on the tag and maybe he didn't play as well, his value goes drastically down. Well, he played well again, but they're still like, do we really want to pay him a ton of money? They didn't, so they tagged him again. Then eventually they let him walk in free agency. So I think, again, you can see how a team can potentially control a player, but in between that, like the player ends up making a lot of money, but he still has to make sure that there's no injuries and that he performs at a very high level. Unless you're Dak Prescott, he broke his ankle on a franchise tag year, and they still ended up giving him a huge contract.
And that was one of the few where you saw the player sign with the same team. Usually when it goes to the franchise tag route, that ends with a player in the current team. So if you want to keep a guy around, you probably can't tick him off by slapping the franchise tag on him because nobody really wants it. We're actually seeing that right now with a guy from the same draft class, but he was a second rounder. So he came up on free agency a year before Brandon Aiyuk, and that's T. Higgins, who's probably going to play under the franchise tag this year, but then he's going to be gone because that's the way they had to play it to keep him around, and ended up not trading him because I think they believe they're in a Super Bowl window as well. And he's probably going to walk next year. And so that's usually how that ends with the franchise tag as the player walks. So if the 49ers are willing to let Brandon Aiyuk walk or do this dance again next year and then maybe trade him then, and maybe they want to keep Debo instead, maybe that's the plan to play this out, play hardball, and make Brandon Aiyuk play under that $14.1 million fifth-year option, which he probably doesn't want to play on, but he would make a lot of money next offseason if he did ball out under that contract, but it would probably be at that point in another uniform. Next, Croc, let's talk about the 49ers' newest tight end, and most likely, finally, the backup to George Kittle. It's been a years-long search for that backup tight end. Did the 49ers find it in Logan Thomas? Next. Today's episode of Locked On 49ers is sponsored by Game Time. Game Time makes getting NBA Finals tickets even faster and easier than ever before. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to tip-off. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee, Game Time takes all the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets or NFL tickets. You looked at the schedule this month, or last month is when the schedule was released. Now in May, I can't believe we're in June already. June 2nd, by the way. June 2nd, money freed up for the 49ers. We'll get to that later. You see a game you like on the NFL schedule? Find those tickets on Game Time. Major League Baseball games, concerts, comedy shows, theater events, whatever it is near you, you can find those tickets and fantastic last-minute deals at Game Time, and those all-in prices as well. No surprise fees at checkout if you toggle in the all-in pricing view. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. So the 49ers brought in, by the way, 209, is there like some big house on a hill somewhere where Tremaine Johnson's hanging out in Stockton and he's like, what, $30 million over 2 years, then the big contract he signed? I remember 49ers fans, I was like, hey man, Tremaine Johnson, he'd be a great fit for the San Francisco 49ers. Let's bring him in. They did not bring him in. He went to the New York Jets. Didn't quite work out. But I imagine there's a house on the hill somewhere that Tremaine Johnson owns. Made some cash.
I think he owns a big home. It's not in California, though.
Okay. Oh, yeah. So he's probably
he got smart. He said, no, you know what? I'm going to move
Arizona,
state over.
Florida, one of those. Yeah.
Close. You're getting warm.
Maybe Texas.
No, not that far. Not that far.
Mexico, Nevada.
There you go.
Hanging out in Las Vegas. Not a lot of flat land in Las Vegas. There's some hills there, I guess, depending on where in Nevada you go. Dude, there's a lot of athletes in Las Vegas, a lot of athletes in Arizona, a ton of them, Florida as well. Anyway,
I think if I, wasn't married, kids, all that, and I had a bunch of money, I think Las Vegas would be a great spot to just be like, you know what? Why not just live in a big ass house here in Las Vegas?
They're huge there.
I don't think they have state taxes.
I can't answer.
I don't think Nevada has state taxes.
They have some tax advantages. I don't know if it's quite like Arizona and Florida, but I know there's a lot of advantages there.
I'm going to Google real quick.
Speaking of Arizona, Croc, former Arizona Cardinals quarterback, converted tight end, and now, I presume, tight end too for the San Francisco 49ers, Logan Thomas has signed a 1-year contract with the San Francisco 49ers. Played 16 games last year with the Washington Commanders, 496 receiving yards with Washington last year, 33 years old. Kind of been a more flexed out tight end as a former quarterback. I remember him coming out of the draft as a former quarterback, 6'6", 240 pounds. I think he's up around 250 now. Huge, athletic. He had a massive arm back in the day. Wasn't a great quarterback, though. And can I take the Wayback Machine to 2015 for a second, Croc? And I remember Logan Thomas coming out of the draft. And this was one of my hits. I saw Logan Thomas and said, man, I know he's got a big arm, but that's not a quarterback. I'm sure he wanted to play quarterback in the NFL, is why he started there. But I was like, this would be an amazing tight end conversion. And so when his time ended with the Arizona Cardinals, they brought in Matt Barkley at one point. And here's my tweet from September 4th, 2015, just before the season started in 2015. And I said, after the Matt Barkley trade, if the Arizona Cardinals cut Logan Thomas, I'd love for the 49ers to pick him up and convert him to tight end. Alas, the Niners didn't listen to me there. The Washington Commanders did, and they converted him to tight end. And he's been a pretty good tight end and had a nice little career for himself. And I presume, Croc, what do you think about Logan Thomas? I think he walks into the tight end 2 role, a role the 49ers have had some trouble finding in recent history. Drafting a couple guys last year. They brought in Eric Saubert, and apparently haven't liked what they've seen, didn't like what they saw post-draft. Mason Pline, undrafted free agent, OTAs, and they went out and got another guy at tight end, yet another 1-year deal. Logan Thomas, where does he fit for you, Croc?
I think he fits right there as tight end 2. We've been trying to figure out what the 49ers are going to do at tight end 2 position. I don't think it's going to be Cam Latu. I don't think it's going to be Braden Willis, even though it coming off as they like him. They did try to go and get a tight end around or right after the draft, but before the draft, they tried to get him, and then the Detroit Lions matched it, so he ended up having to go back there. So clearly they were trying to improve that position. We thought maybe they would do it in the draft, but I understand if you don't, because you did just draft one in the 3rd round and one a little bit later the year before. Getting a guy like Thomas, I think that definitely helps solidify that tight end 2 role for the 49ers.
So Logan Thomas joins now on the 49ers depth chart at tight end. Obviously, George Kittle. I would presume Logan Thomas has a good shot at winning that tight end 2 spot. The 49ers brought in another 1-year free agent in veteran Eric Saubert, who was most recently with the Houston Texans. So knows familiarity with the offense. Last year's 7th rounder, Braden Willis. Last year's 3rd rounder, Cam Latu, still not on the field practicing. They have Jake Tongus, who's a player that I wouldn't know if I passed him on the street. And then undrafted free agent, former Hooper, Mason Pline, who might be sort of a stash player to try to develop long term. So I would assume Mason Pline, the plan for him is, unless he balls out in training camp and in preseason or something, probably be a guy they try to stash on the practice squad and see what they end up having there after a year in the NFL and the NFL weight room and try to develop that basketball athleticism from Mason Pline. But it's a pretty there's a lot of names and a lot of bodies, Croc, but I still think there's a lot to shake out. Like Cam Latu could still win tight end 2. Braden Willis could win tight end 2, and he's a little more of a flexed out, split out, move tight end type like Logan Thomas has been for most of his career. Eric Saubert maybe has the inside track on the Charlie Warner, maybe inline Y tight end role, pretty big guy, good blocker. And then maybe, so maybe there's 2 jobs and you split up George Kittle's backups between a move tight end and a Y tight end. So maybe that's the thought here, but a lot to play out. And I think it's going to be a really interesting training camp battle with Logan Thomas most likely having the pole position there of winning that tight end 2 job.
I don't see one of the younger guys doing it. Now, anybody can take that year 2 jump, and maybe Latu, we view him a lot different if he just catches some of those balls, and maybe it was just a lot going on, right? Just the speed of the game, the complicated offense. You're thinking about all of that, then you drop the ball, then he fumbled in the preseason. So he comes back, he's a little bit more settled down because he understands things. The game starts to move slower. Then we see the best version of him. But we weren't very high, or I know I wasn't very high on him coming out of college. So maybe that could be some of my confirmation bias kicking in, where I didn't care for the pick at the time.
Yeah.
And then it played out how I would probably expect it to play out. So now it's just kind of, I don't want to say move on because I would love to see him develop, but it has worked out so far the way I thought it would.
It's less likely that he pulls the Aaron Banks right in year 2, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, just kidding. Yep, he's actually going to be a good player. And
no, it actually might be very similar, to be honest, because I had a very a certain view of Aaron Banks coming out, and it was more fit than ability. I saw a certain ability there, but I just didn't think the fit was quite there. And he changed some things up, and it clearly fits now. Latu, it might be a little bit more ability that I felt like he was missing, or at least from where they took him over some of the other tight ends that were available.
Right. And with Latu, the run on tight ends went early last year. And even though it was a really deep tight end draft, it wasn't like Latu fell to a place where it was like, oh man, look at these good tight ends are falling. It was like, oh man, Latu's kind of a day 3 guy. And they took him, before day 3 even started, the end of round 3. There was other players. The Rams got Davis Allen. He was one of my favorites. And I thought he was better than Cam Latu. And he was there in the 5th round still. And the Rams got him. He might end up being a starting tight end for them in the near future. And so, yeah, it was just like kind of, maybe confirmation bias now with Latu because didn't love the tape necessarily and didn't know if he was worth that slot for the 49ers there. And then they double dipped at tight end, and to still need to double dip in free agency now with tight ends and find themselves a backup. That's, it's not a great look. And they're telling us what they think about all of those other guys, but a lot to play out still at that position. I think I misspoke earlier, by the way. Washington is where Logan Thomas broke out at tight end in 2020. That was like his big first season as a tight end in the NFL. 72 catches, 670 yards, and 6 touchdowns. And he was, a fantasy football darling that year, his first year in Washington. But he actually, didn't really play much. And then Buffalo Bills is where he first converted to tight end in 2017. Caught 7 passes there. Next season with the Bills, caught 12 more passes. Obviously, still developing as a tight end. Got that late start. Detroit Lions for a year in 2019. He ended up starting 3 games there, 16 catches, 173 yards, and a touchdown. And then the next year ended up in Washington and really broke out and had 110 targets that year, 72 catches. Followed that up with an injury-plagued season where he only played 6 games. 2022 in Washington, 39 catches, 323 yards, and a touchdown. Then last year, 55 catches, 496 yards, and 4 touchdowns. Logan Thomas, the former quarterback turned tight end, now a member of the San Francisco 49ers. I thought I remembered statistically him having more big seasons like that 2020 year, but apparently not. It was he's kind of been he's really just had he's had 3 years as getting like a full plate of starts in the NFL. One of those because he was hurt. So 15, 6, 13, and 15 starts the last 4 years in Washington. That's Logan Thomas.
Yeah, I think when he signed a contract. One of those years, I think he was expected to really take off, and it didn't happen.
Yeah.
Like they re-signed him and then thought like, oh, okay, he's going to be this consistent tight end for us and like real tight end 1, and it just didn't happen.
Next, I want to talk about, first of all, sad news in the NFL, the passing of a former San Francisco 49er and the Sonoma State legend in Larry Allen. And I'll talk a little bit about the age of this 49ers roster next. This episode of Locked On 49ers is sponsored by FanDuel, America's #1 sports book, and it's winner take all time right now in the NBA and the NHL. And FanDuel is giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own because right now new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's right. All you got to do is you sign up to FanDuel, new customers, you win that first $5 bet, you get an extra $150 to play with. We're talking bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and a whole lot more. Bet on NFL futures, who's going to win offensive, defensive rookie of the year, who's going to win the next Super Bowl, and a whole lot more. Weekly lines already up there as well at FanDuel. All you got to do is visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make every playoff shot count. That is FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Man, Larry Allen, at the young age of 52 years old, Croc. He was on a family vacation in Mexico. I haven't heard any further details on that, on what exactly happened, but passed away at the age of 52. Hall of Fame guard. He ended his career with the San Francisco 49ers, played his college ball at Sonoma State. Can you imagine what that would be like, Croc? I mean, Sonoma State wasn't a powerhouse football school, right? And it's a division of football that doesn't even exist anymore. San Francisco State, Sonoma State, Chico State, all those teams used to play each other. They don't even have football programs anymore. That whole division's gone. But imagine if you were, the type of high school player that would play your college ball at Sonoma State, a 230-pound defensive lineman, and you show up week 1, 19 years old, and you're going against Larry Allen. You're probably like, what the heck is this? College football is crazy. But you're actually going against the guy who's going to be a future Hall of Famer. I would love to see what that tape looked like of Larry Allen at Sonoma State.
So a couple of things. I read up on Larry Allen years ago because I heard something, which I'll tell you about it now. But early on, he was from Los Angeles, and he moved to Northern California because he got stabbed several times. Got stabbed in the head. He was stabbed several times. We're talking about as an early teenager or along those lines. Moves up north, attends Tokay High School, where I went to high school, attended Edison High School, where I coach high school. Hey. But I'm not sure he played football there. If you look at his Wikipedia, it dates everything from his personal life. So he went to Tokay, went to Edison, and then ended up going somewhere else, but eventually went on to Sonoma State. And, we see how everything played out. But the guy has some 209 ties. Really sad passing as well. Really sad.
That's crazy. A reminder to everybody to take care of yourself. 52 years old, too. I mean, that was young. For some reason, I was expecting, he was in his 60s or something like that. He's only 52. It wasn't that long ago. He was playing still in the league with the San Francisco 49ers. And remember, he was kind of late to the party with those Dallas Cowboys teams, and that, they already had a powerhouse offensive line and a powerhouse team in, I think it was 94 when they drafted Larry Allen. And then he ended up being, I think he was a right tackle at first, then ended up being the, obviously a Hall of Fame left guard after that. So he was kind of joined that party when the Dallas Cowboys were already in their prime. But just a phenomenal player, one of the most powerful players in the NFL and NFL history. There's a clip floating around today I saw with him bench pressing 700 pounds. Wow. And, when the bar is just bending, I mean, that's wild stuff. 700 pounds. He was athletic for how powerful and how big he was.
Powerful, athletic guy. And then put some things into perspective with just how young he is. Terrell Owens turns 51 this year. So we're talking about a guy who passed away. We're thinking of Terrell Owens as this guy that's still kind of in the prime of being an adult.
Right.
And Larry Allen, a year older, passes. It's really sad. And it was sudden. He was on vacation. So clearly this isn't something, we've seen people on hospice or they've been dealing with cancer. That happened with Bill Walton. Rest in peace, Bill Walton. But they could kind of see it coming. He had been dealing with cancer for a while. That doesn't sound like that was the case with Larry Allen.
Sad story. Gone too soon. Larry Allen, age of 52. That's a bummer. Speaking of age, actually, there was a note I saw on the San Francisco 49ers roster, Croc. The oldest roster, in fact, in the NFL. Average age of 20, an old roster, 27. I mean, it seems so young where I'm sitting right now. But as far as average age on a roster, 27 years old is pretty old. Then we're talking about the 90-man rosters in the NFL as well. The 49ers have the oldest roster in the NFL, 4 months older than the New York Jets, which would be second, then the Houston Texans, then the Cleveland Browns, then the Miami Dolphins. So Shanahan tree, maybe that's something the Shanahan tree is into, is a little bit older players, more seasoned football players. But and the thing is with a 90-man roster, most of the extra players that aren't making the 53 are younger and probably under the age of 27 too. So that will grow once you look at what the 53-man rosters look like. It'll be even older than the average age of 27 years old. But, looking at Brandon Aiyuk and the big money that he's owed and how many players the 49ers are already paying, and we talk about this Super Bowl window a lot. It's just another reminder, when you got Trent Williams is 36 years old and you've got, a running back with the tread on his tires that Christian McCaffrey has, and you have George Kittle who's in his 30s. Like it's not a young football team. And it just kind of underscores what we've talked a lot about this offseason in the Super Bowl window and how this team is really in win now mode for a reason, because there's a transitional phase that's going to happen sometime soon because they're one of the older and more expensive rosters in the NFL.
Look at the guys that have been, heavily contributing for the 49ers. Not a whole lot of young names that you throw out there. Even guys like, Brock Purdy, who has 1 full year of starting under his belt. He turns 25 years old this year. So a lot of older players on the 49ers, still some guys who I feel like are starting to hit the prime ages, right? With Brandon Aiyuk. He's not this old guy. Like, he's probably just feeling like, man, I got about 5-6 more years like in like the prime range of my ability. But there are some other guys that are kind of getting over the hump. Guys like, George Kittle. I don't view him as this old guy, maybe because he has this youthful personality, but he's a guy kind of getting up there just a little bit.
Yeah, he's over 30, and he was an older prospect coming in, and we talked about that with this draft class, an older draft class for the 49ers. All of the first 3 picks of the 49ers will be 24-year-old rookies, and that's what George Kittle was, right? That 5th-year senior coming out of school. So once you get into that second contract, you're already basically, in your 30s or getting close to your 30s there once you get into that second contract a little bit. That's where George Kittle is now. And so, it's just a reminder, like the old football team, this is a team that needs to win. And I think that's when you look at the Aiyuk situation, to bring it full circle, the 49ers are in it to win it right now. They're in win now mode. So whatever decisions are made, I think are going to be through that lens, not as much worried about the future. If they have to, what they view as overpay Aiyuk to keep the game together a little bit longer, then figure things out later. I think that's something they'll do. Or maybe that's what makes them say, nope, we can't pay you now, but we want you to play this 1 year. And then we're going to say goodbye to you, Aiyuk, instead of goodbye to Deebo Samuel or whatever it is. They have to do whatever they can to win now, because transitions will be coming for the San Francisco 49ers team. You got Brock Purdy, who's going to make, at least $45 million per year if he has another year like he had last year. That's on the horizon next offseason. They've got one huge contract they need to do every offseason, it feels like, which is a good problem to have, because that means you have good players worthy of making that money, but it also starts to make the finances of your football team a little more difficult. Thanks, everybody, for making Locked On 49ers your first listen here on the Locked On Podcast Network every day. Make sure you are subscribed up on YouTube and everywhere you get your podcasts. Croc and I back tomorrow. Winky's back as well, Winky Wednesday style, right here, Locked On 49ers.